What's going on, Expanse fans? James Hancock here, back to review episode 4 of season 3, an episode called Reload. As a gesture of solidarity with my fellow Earthlings, I'm actually rocking out my United Nations t-shirt this evening, although given what's going on Earth and all the shit that Aaron Wright has been up to, maybe it's the wrong episode with which to show my solidarity. But I wanted to make sure that in my videos I didn't show a disproportionate amount of loyalty to the Martians or the Belters, even if I really feel like emotionally I'm all in with the Belters. But tonight's episode was a pretty exciting episode. I think it was a major improvement over the previous one, which felt a little bit like filler. I'm trying to develop a mental discipline of not getting too impatient to see the events from the books that I want to see, that I know are coming. It's almost like the show is engaging in a form of cruel and unusual punishment by dangling some of these events in front of us, but not delivering on them quite yet. My assumption all along has been that the events at the end of Book 2, Caliban's War, would serve as a bit of a mid-season break around episode perhaps 5 or 6. That's clearly not going to happen. I just hope we don't have to wait till episode 13 to see all this insane stuff that is on the horizon. But I have a question about the first scene, and I want to try to phrase it as delicately as possible so that I don't give away a spoiler. But we see Drummer and her team hunting down this ship called the Nauvoo. It's an absolutely enormous ship. You could start a fresh civilization with this ship. And Fred has sent her there with a very specific purpose of retrofitting the ship to their needs. But without my saying who's supposed to be on it, because we don't see anybody in the episode, I guess my question is, are they changing the purpose of what the Nauvoo was for, or are those people essentially in cold storage? It seems like a slight departure from the books. In any case, all I will say is that the Nauvoo plays an incredibly important role in the chapters to come. But what I really liked about this episode is that it presents a predicament that really tests the loyalties of Alex and Bobby, because we see the Rocinante in desperate need of resupply. But as they're scavenging through the remains of a battle out in space, they come upon a Martian ship that actually still has a few survivors on board. While Bobby's a little annoyed that the Rocinante is basically stealing materials from Mars, Alex very wisely points out that these 3 survivors would not have been discovered otherwise. But as these survivors start to realize they are not in fact aboard a Martian ship, they're actually in fact aboard a ship that has been kind of sort of stolen from Mars, these 3 very loyal Martian soldiers become a little bewildered about how Alex and Bobby can stand by while this war is going on. And what was cool is that we actually got to see inside the head of Alex a little bit in this episode. There have been times in the past where Alex has been reduced to the role of essentially a bus driver for the rest of the cast. But we see him trying to bond with these soldiers, and he has absolutely no shame or regrets whatsoever. He put in his 20, he's a civilian now. But this next generation is basically getting in his face, and they just all out attack him, disarm him, and they try to take the ship by force. While all of this is unfolding, we see a giant schism emerging between Anna and the Secretary General back on Earth. The Secretary General has brought in Anna to help him write this enormous speech that he's making, but she becomes horrified when about halfway through the speech, it very clearly shifts into paragraphs that have been added by Aaron Wright. And Anna can clearly see that the Secretary General is basically the puppet of Aaron Wright, and that their goal is to place every single person in the solar system under their flag. But I have to say, as much as I love and adore this show, and I think you can make a case for this show being the best show out there right now for just hardcore science fiction fanatics, from season 1 up through now, I feel like one of the only real flaws of this show is that they've never found a way to make the events on Earth seem nearly as compelling as the events out in space. All the political maneuvering, all the backstabbing, all the infighting, it just too often feels like filler that is made up by the showrunners of the show as opposed to material inspired by the drama in the novels. But that's a minor quibble on my part, because the rest of the episode is rather exciting. When Holden sees one of the Martians trying to raid their armory, he immediately throws down, goes to war with them. He ends up submitting the guy with a rear naked choke. However, one teeny tiny quibble about a rear naked choke: if you are choking somebody out, there's absolutely no need whatsoever to cover up their mouth, because if you're choking somebody out, they can't breathe, therefore they can't talk. So you're actually doing the reverse of what you're trying to accomplish. If you're covering up someone's mouth while choking, it's actually a less effective rear naked choke. So if you really want to make them be quiet, you go for the full-blown rear naked choke with your hand behind their head. If there's no blood or oxygen going through the brain, guess what? The person can't speak. But this confrontation inevitably ends in a Mexican standoff with everybody pointing their guns at one another, and Bobby just casually strolls in and says, like, what's going on? And she delivers a speech that I think is one of her most important character-defining moments so far in the show, where she talks about how her time with Christian has taught her an incredibly valuable lesson. It's not just about being a badass soldier fighting for your side. It's actually having enough perspective to understand who the true enemy is. And luckily, all ends peacefully. These soldiers turn over their weapons, and they make an agreement with Christian where they're actually going to take a message to their commanding officer, who will then have to send it to a UN ship to Admiral Southern. But Christian's very carefully, but very successfully starting to get her message out. She also gets Holden to agree to allow her to send a message to Anna on Earth. And while Anna is desperate to get back to her wife and daughter, she does receive the message before she's about to depart, which reveals the treachery of Ehrenreich. So whether Ehrenreich realizes it or not, his days are numbered as a political figure of any real importance or relevance. But you can't qualify as a great episode of The Expanse without at least a little taste of the proto-molecule, and this episode ends on a bang, where on Io, May's having a little bit of a temper tantrum because she has not been able to see her friend Katoa for a while, and she's kicking people in the shins, and she's basically stomping her feet. She's just ready to see her friend or talk to her dad. She just wants something to go her way. So Jules Pierre Mao very patiently follows her down to the lab where she's trying to get in to see her friend. And this is where we see a little bit of the dark side of Jules Pierre Mao, because in the previous episode, he was ready to shut everything down, and we saw how he still resembles a human being in some ways. However, when they come into this lab, he has May sent away because this little boy, Katoa, he still speaks like Katoa periodically, but he also speaks like a full-blown extension of the proto-molecule, and they very quickly realize that he is speaking with other elements of the proto-molecule around the solar system. But there's also the little extra detail of this completely destroyed, dismembered body on the floor all around him, and it's almost like he's like a puzzle trying to reassemble the different body parts. It was some pretty creepy, eerie, gory stuff. So I think it says a lot about Jules Pierre Mao when he sees a sight that horrific that it actually would get him back on board with their project. So all around, very satisfying episode. I can't help but chomp at the bit a little bit to see the events that I've been waiting for this entire season, but we still have 9 more episodes to go before the end of the season, so I just need to cool my jets and just wait for the inevitable to occur. Also, one quick note for the people who have been nice enough to be watching my Expanse videos. Please continue to feed me little details and pieces of information about either the text that these shows come from and or the actual science behind it. At age 41, it has been a very, very long time since I've sat in a science class of any kind. So if any hardcore science geeks out there have some interesting insights about how some of the science in this science fiction actually functions, bring it on. I love it all. But I really appreciate the support from my channel. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving me a subscribe. If you want to hunt me down and talk, the best place to reach me is always on Twitter at Colbrax. One quick plug for something I've been working on personally. I'm going to include a link in the show notes below, but I recently produced an animated film called Cop Dog from director Bill Plimpton. It is available on iTunes, so if you could either rent and or leave a review, I would be in your debt and be your best friend for all time. And I'm not quite sure what my next video will be on this channel. At a bare minimum, it'll be Sunday for the latest episode of Westworld, but hopefully I'll have a chance to finish season 1 of Cobra Kai between now and then as well. But I hope everyone has an excellent evening, and as always, onwards and upwards.